If God exists, why isn't that self-evident? Why isn't there a neon sign in the sky saying, God exists, or a physical God residing somewhere on Earth? Why do we have to have philosophical debates to determine the answer to a very simple question? If God really exists, why isn't it more obvious? Today, we're going to talk about that. Hey, I'm Bailey.
I'm Michael.
And I'm David.
And welcome back to the Facing the Gates podcast. Today, we're talking about the philosophical objection to God's existence, known as the problem of divine hiddenness, as I just described in the little intro diddly thing that you heard. You heard it, that you heard the problem. So, to start out, I wanted to ask you guys, as usual with these episodes, do you think this is a particularly strong objection to God's existence? And if so, I guess, how much of an issue would it be for you?
I'll let David go first because I'm rereading it.
Okay. Gotcha.
I mean, as I said, like, with the last episode, it makes sense under certain ideas, but, like, in my perspective, God, like, the idea of, say, like, heaven and whatnot, it's supernatural. It's beyond kind of the natural realm.
Right.
So, therefore, supernatural being that's all-knowing, he's not going to show his face. And as I stated before, like, with the idea of, like, morality and whatnot, with a Christian viewpoint, he's not going to show his face because he doesn't want to force you into a certain way. He just wants to nudge you and be like, yeah, I'm here, but you might not quite know it.
I'm going to add, as an agnostic theist who believes in a higher power, aka God, sorry about that, but the higher power's purpose is not to be like, look at me! Here I am! Look at me!
Yeah, because
I'm number one!
that would be pretty vain.
Yeah.
Because then it would just be a dictatorship and we'd have no choice.
Yeah.
It could be a very
If I
vain
believe in a God, I believe in a God of free will. So, therefore, it's up to me to decide whether I believe or not. He can set something in, like, in your path to be like, hey, look at this. But he's not going to be like, God's real. All of these other religions are wrong. Because that takes away the free will.
Right. The long and short of it is that's basically my answer to this question. But
So we all kind of agree.
I'll nuance it a little bit more.
Just like last episode, we're just going to be sucking each other off.
Well, I mean, we vary, but at least for the core understanding, like, what Christianity is, we agree on that basis.
Religion in general.
Yeah.
It's a... Don't quote me on this, but is there a religion that goes, hey, God's going to show him like, hey, fucker, look at me, I'm real.
Every doomsday theorist that believes in hope.
Well, it depends. If you look at Jesus, who claimed to be God.
But that was how many years ago? Christianity.
Couple thousand.
Jesus was the king of the Jews. Am I right?
Well, that's the name they put up there. He wasn't. He didn't claim to be the king of the Jews.
He was the proto-Christian.
Yeah, he was the start of Christianity.
Right.
So unless you happened to be alive back then, you can't really use that as a, look at this,
And as
You have to find God yourself, and you have to find Christianity yourself.
Yeah, and to be fair, though,
I forget his name, but as you say, like one dude that was like just kind of documenting ended up becoming Christian like way after he died. And I mean that still happens.
Yeah, because Jesus, how I look at it, he couldn't be a Christian because he was the Son of God. He can only be an extension of God. But everyone who followed him could be Christian. Everyone before him could only be Jewish because there wasn't
Makes
a
sense.
Savior.
Yeah.
And God never...
I don't know if I necessarily agree or disagree, but I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And God never came down except for like Adam and Eve, like, look at me!
I guess
Yeah.
the main thing is with Christianity having that kind of unique aspect about it with Jesus. There's still that kind of separation of like with like the Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
Where like they're the same, basically the same entity, but they occur for different reasons a little bit. And like when you say God, we think like the Spirit, the almighty powerful being.
We think of Jesus, we think of the earthly being of Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
think of the Holy Spirit as exactly that.
Because I mean, depending on how you interpret this, like he was here, there was a big, well, not a big neon sign, but maybe like a little open sign,
Mm-hmm.
just like, hey, I'm Jesus. You might want to follow me.
Yeah.
I say like the big G-man up there. I mean, I'm basically him.
Yeah, I've been listening to a podcast that goes through the Gospel of John and kind of lays out more of the cultural context of it. And I mean, already the Gospel of John is pretty much very clear on Jesus claiming to be God as it is. He pretty much states it very clearly. But knowing much more of the cultural context, there's a lot of places where Jesus pretty much explicitly puts himself into the position of God, doing things that only God could do in the Old Testament, which now, understanding that, I can see why it was offensive to the audience at the time, because, you know, these people are like, oh, you're better than the prophets? Who do you think you are? And
You're better than these intellectuals that we have trusted with our religious beliefs for millennia.
yeah, and then also understanding the certain sects of Judaism around that time,
Yeah.
like the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and what their motivations were.
And I think that's... Don't quote me on this, but did Jesus ever pass judgment upon the Jewish sects that didn't necessarily believe in him at the time?
He condemned them for their... he condemned them for being so caught up in their religious laws that they... Because here, this is another thing I've been gathering from that podcast, is basically the Gospel of John points out that people who are not so deeply entrenched in sin will immediately recognize Jesus for who he is, as the Son of God. Even someone who saw him as an infant child immediately recognized him because of their moral purity. Whereas these Jewish people who were seen as the upright moral people were really the furthest from it, because they were so caught up in the rules that they weren't really focusing on
The rules, the habits.
the reason the rules were there. So Jesus did condemn them for that.
Okay.
They were caught up in the
there's a
physical
number
aspect.
of places where he kind of
But it's not
condemns
like
them.
the market where he just wrecks shop. It's more like a, hey, hello.
Oh, there's a number of places where he confronts like the Jewish leaders at the time. Depending on, you know, which gospel you read, because some of them include stories that others don't, and some elaborate more and that kind of thing. But long story short, yes.
Yeah, and I mean that's why I wanted to bring up that note, because like under Christianity, it's kind of like in one way he has existed in the physical realm.
Mm-hmm.
So if
I was actually going to bring that up later.
yeah, I mean that's just stating the obvious, but
Yeah.
it's an interesting idea because like most other religions, don't have that problem
that
of
physical person
yeah,
that has
of
become.
defining.
But it never felt like he passed necessarily judgment upon people. He'd be like, "Hey, fuckers, right here."
Oh, if you read it,
But
reread
I
the
need
Gospel
the-
of John. That one's very.
I definitely will.
clear.
Because in the teachings that I've been given as a child, Jesus was like this all loving, all caring.
There's a
And he wouldn't necessarily pass judgment, but he'd be like, "Hey, that's fucked up. Shouldn't do that."
there's a Orthodox icon of Jesus, and here Bailey goes on the Orthodox thing again. But I've been looking into it, right? So there's an icon of Jesus where it, at first glance, you're like, that's a really derpy picture of Jesus, but half of his face is really peaceful, and the other half is really stern, and so it kind of captures that dichotomy of who Jesus is. He was a peaceful and loving person, but at the same time, he passes judgment on people, and sometimes that can be wrathful if you're on the wrong side of the
passes
situation.
judgment and gives heedance.
See, I think my problem is I'm thinking of judgment as earthly judgment and not spiritual judgment.
Right.
Because with Jesus being the extension of God, he would pass that spiritual judgment instead of earthly.
Yeah. Well, he does both.
Yeah.
He condemns them to their face, basically. But also, if they don't correct themselves, you got
It feels
you
more
got some situations.
It feels like it puts a spiritual scar on you instead of like in real life you would just be able to brush it off.
It's like a teacher having to sit down like, yeah, you're going to fail. Here's how you can do better.
Yeah.
Basically giving you heedance towards your path.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead.
It's like it's not calling you a piece of shit but saying, "Hey, you can do better."
Effectively. So let's get back to the problem of divine hiddenness. Even though it's not a problem for you guys, it is a problem for a lot of people, because they're like, well, if God exists, why do I have to do all this hard work to figure out that he does? So to break it down.
Hold up real quick.
Go ahead.
A Christian, an agnostic, and an atheist all agree on shit for the second episode.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it also plays a lot with like Christianity having a unique position.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, under like viewing it as a Christian, it's kind of obvious. It's laid out there. Yeah, there was a physical form, basically, where like our religions, it would lead probably towards a little more nuance because there hasn't been basically a physical form. There's been like,
Yeah, to be fair though, with like the Eastern religions, their belief in God is kind of an absurd statement, because they believe that the world is God, the universe is God, so there's no real belief in God in the Western monotheistic sense in that way. So I mean, in that sense, they don't even have that question.
yeah,
But
because you just get absolved into the world, basically.
yeah,
I mean, that sounds nice.
I guess. I don't know.
I mean, more
We
interesting than the void, I believe.
Yeah.
Let's get back on the boat.
Right.
And get this ship a sailing.
Right. So, to analyze this problem more effectively, I'm going to break it down into its smallest parts and analyze each question one by one. So, for the first question, why can't God be a part of the material universe? And we've kind of talked about this already.
On kind of both ends.
Yeah, but first of all, if by God we mean the uncreated, metaphysically necessary first cause, creator of the universe, it makes sense for him to be outside of the universe. After all, one cannot create something unless one is separate from the thing being created. And like David mentioned already, technically, under Christianity, and only in Christianity, God did become a part of the material universe in the incarnation of Christ. Also, this will be a theme in this episode, so we need to make one thing clear from the start. In Christianity, we must make a distinction between believing that God exists and believing in God. For example, you can believe that I exist. That much is self-evident. You can see me. But if you believe in me, that is something different entirely. It requires you to have faith in me. Likewise, with Christianity, belief does not merely entail mental assent. It entails an act of faith. Whereas the problem of divine hiddenness, sorry, we just recorded the problem of evil last time. Oops. The problem of divine hiddenness primarily deals with the belief that God exists. So really, this problem is a surface level problem. It doesn't really get to what belief really is. It just gets to the belief that, not the belief in.
Yeah, because kind of as like when we were talking about Jesus as a person, like it's, as I said, it's obvious he was a real person.
Yeah.
But it's more...
Unless you're a mythicist, which
no
one respects.
If you're a mythicist, but
you might need to get off Reddit.
I mean, Reddit's full of weird people, and it's beautiful.
Did you have anything to say? No?
Nah.
All right, well, let's go to the next question. If God really exists, why isn't it more obvious? Now, that question, to be fair, is a valid one. I think it comes from a earnest seeking place. But what is implied in the objection is that if I only had good evidence that God existed, I would believe in him. But that doesn't necessarily follow. Remember the distinction made between belief in and belief that. Just because you know that God exists doesn't mean you'd therefore be willing to believe in him and worship him. So even if David believed God existed, it wouldn't necessarily follow that he would worship God. The Christian God doesn't just want you to know he exists and then you're done. He wants for people to worship him and to follow his will. So if he made a giant neon sign in the sky that said, "Yo, I'm God, I'm real, guys," that wouldn't necessarily make people worship him. So the evidential problem isn't the real heart of the issue. It is someone's willingness to worship and follow God.
Yeah, I mean, that falls into like if he had a big neon fucking sign, it'd be like, oh, well, what's he doing for me? And the next question gets asked. And it also kind of falls into like the previous episode, the idea of free will and having that choice.
Mm-hmm.
And because, I mean, if you just pop that big sign up, and he's going to know how we're going to react to it.
Yeah, then what's the fucking point of being like, you got free will if you're just going to put a fucking egg, like on the interstate, an exit sign, like, hey, Chick-fil-A, next right. You're hungry and you gotta piss. Let's go. There's no choice there. It's been 40 miles since you just got off the interstate. You got a family of 5. You know where you're going. Chick-fil-A, because they're so polite and you gotta pee.
Okay. Yeah.
And to your left, Jesus. Make your choice.
Okay.
I was going to say Chick-fil-A because they chicken is heavenly.
Not gonna lie, it is pretty good. Also, psychologically speaking, people are more likely to maintain their dearest beliefs despite the evidence. In other words, in most cases, people believe what they want to believe regardless of the evidence against it. We can see this everywhere, even in this podcast.
I mean, look at cults.
Yeah. So I've given you both evidence that God exists and that Christianity is true, but that doesn't mean that you've necessarily changed your views. And that's not, to say a bad thing, you know, but
and I think
it's just a exercise in how we are conditioned psychologically to just
and I think a lot of it comes down to,
well, also culturally, because especially like with men, we're very much supposed to be held into our beliefs.
That's true. That plays into it.
And I think a lot of it is viewpoint. Like, I personally believe myself that as I mentioned, I think off script and off the last episode, I'd rather die an honest man not saved than die a saved man lying. I think that would hold more weight to my personal merit, because just like the once saved always saved fallacy, just because you're I wish you guys could see these air quotes, saved doesn't mean you're saved. And all we can live is our truth.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's through Jesus Christ or whatever religious entity you believe in. You can't lie to yourself. Because at the end of the day, you know what you believe. Or you're just ignorant.
Yeah. Two things on that. One, I'm going to beat a dead horse by saying this, but that's why I say when you're kind of searching, if you're searching through religions and stuff, try to be objective about it and not go based on your feelings. Go where the evidence leads. The second thing is, as we may talk about at some point in the future, there are different views on salvation in Christianity.
Yeah.
Some people believe that it is a one-time thing that happens.
I know, I just mentioned that.
Other people believe that it is actually a process that doesn't necessarily happen at this date, but it's a continual process that happens throughout your life.
It's a lifestyle.
Which is the process of being saved.
Yeah, because...
And that just depends on what tradition you're talking to, basically.
I hated growing up and people were like, I just got saved at church.
Now I'm going to go be a shitty person.
I just got baptized.
Because I'm all good.
I'm going to go commit all these sins and it's going to be okay.
Yep. That's why I have a problem with once saved, always saved.
And because
not everybody, but so many people do that.
And I hate to say it, it's a modern day fallacy because you can go to a church and go get baptized and be saved, and then what?
Then you got your ticket to heaven, you're all good, man. You can go murder 17 people and you're all good. You're good with the G-man, you know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you do after the fact.
Yeah, and you can repent later, you know, just apologize. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm going to go kill 17 more people.
To some of these people, you ain't even got to do that. You already saved, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Once saved, always saved.
Yeah.
It's like a coupon. Once you got it,
isn't that like a delayed Calvinist?
Yeah.
Whereas my personal belief is, if I was to believe in, say, the Christian God, there's not a, as you brought up, there's not necessarily a finite point where you're saved. It's a working towards the end goal of you being Christ-like and you accepting Christ into your life, accepting God and all that, and you putting your works plus your faith together and you being accepted into the next level, aka heaven.
And then and that's when the old G-man looks through your resume like, yeah, you weren't a dick. Okay, you can come in. You got the job.
And that's like, another thing I can't believe in is some people say people who never heard of Christianity or whatever, you know, there's still people like that, that are good people, that have good hearts and good morals and all that, that they're just doomed to hell because they're not lucky enough to hear this word. I can't necessarily fight. Maybe, and I could see where some people like, maybe not heaven, but hell.
Yeah, that kind of slips into the problem of evil a little bit because people are like, oh, well, how could God not... There are certain... See, I laid out the problem of evil in the last episode as a certain framework, but there's a lot of ways of framing it that kind of allude to that, basically.
Or like some sectors believe if a baby dies unbaptized, they go to hell.
After a certain time.
If a baby dies, they go to heaven. If a baby dies baptized, they go to heaven.
Yeah, my short answer to the people that like haven't heard the gospel, the short answer is God is just, so he's not going to condemn someone who doesn't deserve hell. And either way, whether they're saved or not, that's not for us to make that judgment call. So
yeah, I mean,
all I can, and I'm not saying don't go preach to people who haven't heard it.
For all we know, you don't have to like go through what we would think the process of being saved is, and just be a decent person.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
And I mean,
Christians are not the rule makers of Christianity.
God is, just like with any religion, the God is the rule maker.
Yeah. All right, so back to the center of the universe.
Center of this shit.
Yeah. So, some philosophers have even gone as far as to propose that God, quote, hides himself from those who don't want to do his will. The idea that God hides himself is also not foreign in Christianity. In fact, I have a source that documents 34 verses in the Bible about God hiding himself, most of which involve him hiding from immoral people. So perhaps the reason God's hiding is because you're just being a shitty person.
Piece of shit.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily say it's hiding from...
No, and when we say you're being a piece of shit, it's easy to, like, you know, be like, oh yeah, you're just a terrible person. Or you could just be wrapped up in things that the Bible calls a sin, but you...
Holding another god higher than God.
Yeah.
AKA money, power, greed, fucking kids, murdering people.
You have to be introspective and be able to recognize where those things are. And it's offensive. The Bible is offensive in that saying, hey, you're wrong on this, you need to change. And that's going to be offensive to anyone, anywhere, at any point in time.
It's offensive.
So that's why you can't really go and be like, oh, well, we need to change this part of the Bible because it's offensive. It's always going to be offensive.
What you say as a Christian is offensive to a lot of Christians who are just born into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
What I say may be offensive to some agnostics. What David is saying is definitely offensive to some atheists.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would put them more into the anti-deist crowd.
We're not here to put Band-Aids on people.
Right.
We're here to speak what we believe in and hold these conversations. Just like, if Jesus Christ is the Savior, he's not necessarily going to care if you find it offensive. He's going to want to like, be blunt with you, like, hey, listen, I'm trying to save you.
Yeah.
I mean, just like, your doctor might be offensive, like, hey, you got cancer. Or
you need to stop eating this terrible food.
Hey, you got lung diseases and cancer and you're still smoking, you need to stop fucking smoking. Yeah. It's going to hurt sometimes. But sometimes you need to shut up, look in yourself, and listen.
As we said, maybe a little bit of tough love.
Yeah. Also, if God is omniscient, also God is omniscient. So if God exists, he technically knows you better than you know yourself because he created you. He knows what it would take to convince someone of his existence. Those who are willing to believe in him will believe in him. Those who are unwilling to believe in him won't. And I guess the last thing about this question is the argument is largely subjective. If someone doesn't believe that there is good enough evidence to believe in God, that is a subjective opinion, not an objective fact. We know this because it is not unanimous among humans that God does or doesn't exist.
We've literally had wars over that.
Yeah. People have differing views, so the objection is not necessarily a logical objection, but an emotional and individualistic one. But what if God already has given us sufficient evidence to believe in him, and we're just too ignorant to believe? Beyond this, what exactly does the Christian God want from us? Well, he doesn't want us to be selfish or prideful. But if he gave us a reason to believe he exists after we demand evidence, that only adds fuel to the flame and is contrary to God's redemptive plan. God wants you to come to him on his terms, not yours.
Oof. That just hurt a lot of Christians' feelings right there.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry, not sorry.
Hashtag sorry, not sorry. Z-Snap. Sorry.
And again, I'm going to bring it up once more. He wants you to come on his terms. Right?
Yeah. It's not about you.
Yeah. So...
Sorry to keep beating a dead horse with the same themes, but...
Yeah.
The biggest problem with Christians is...
Christians.
Exactly.
As Gandhi said. I think it was Gandhi. I like your Christ, but not your Christians.
Yeah.
I think quite a few people have said something similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
because, I mean, on paper, not a bad thing. Pretty good.
And I think I mentioned this in between episodes because, you know, we're going to talk about Christians later in another episode.
Yeah.
But in between episodes, I mentioned, you know, to Michael, like, I'm not a Christian because other Christians. I mean, partly, yeah, because, you know.
Like, growing up, yes, but then you did your research.
But also, you've done a lot of research. You've done a lot of self-seeking.
Right, but that was also from Christians. So to some degree, yes, I am a Christian because Christians have helped me along the way. But my justification in being a Christian is not because of Christians.
Yeah. It's
because of Christ. Because if it were for other Christians, I wouldn't be a Christian because there's a lot of fuck-ups. And for every good Christian, you can find an equally bad Christian. So, I mean, there's going to be good and bad in each group.
Let me say this. When he says bad, add quotation marks. Okay? In my personal viewpoint.
Yeah, I didn't mean like... poor examples of Christians.
People who say they are Christians.
I mean, look at televangelists.
Yeah.
But, let's see.
Again, David shitting on televangelists.
I know I've said this 100 times. That's why I respect Bailey's viewpoint. It's because I know him not only as Bailey, but as someone who has done a lot of seeking and searching through his religion to be a better person and to be as Christ-like as he can be and accept his shortcomings.
Yeah, I mean, basically, as you said, you have to have that fundamental belief in Christ before you can really start doing your research and have, like, more objective...
I mean, not necessarily.
Well, not necessarily, because if you're questioning things, if you're in a position like Michael is, and I think is looking through some stuff, I mean, like, you can look for reasons to believe or reasons not to believe. Like, you're either side of the fence, you can look for reasons why you should or should not believe something.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's up to you to be honest to yourself overall.
Yeah. Because some of it, I understand that some of it is going to be seemingly opinion-based. I know you can't be like 100% like this is fact, you know? Because some of it is a little elusive and requires a little bit of faith. But any belief you have is going to require some degree of faith.
That's like, I believe in a higher power. I have a lot of faith in that. There's something bigger to me out here.
Mm-hmm.
And I might not necessarily know what it is at this time. It might have not spoken to me, or I might not have done enough to seek it out. But I believe there's something bigger, stronger, tougher, smarter.
Bigger, better, faster, stronger.
Than me.
Rest in peace, Daft Punk.
So.
Good song.
You don't necessarily have to have that core belief.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, well, kind of what I was getting to is like with you have a belief of a higher power, and to start seeking out something more kind of objectively based would take some fundamental belief in, say, a higher power for like...
Well, to make that leap to believe in it. Or as you said,
like, to have... You have to have a belief in Christ to believe in Christianity, and then it allowed you to search more objectively instead of just subjective.
Yeah, like how Bailey's searching through different parts of Christianity, finding what he truly believes himself as a Christian,
and like the history behind it, and
another sub issue with doing that is trying to be, like I'm telling you guys, objective.
Yeah, it's hard as fuck.
I'm questioning because I've hit a wall in my search, and I'm like, okay, I'm having all these theological questions. Do they matter? Because to some degree, we're all wrong at some level.
Yeah.
But there are some things that we're going to say, no, that view is actually wrong because it is a departure from this, which is true, and I'm kind of questioning, like, okay, do I completely relativize theology, or do I say there is an absolute right and wrong when it comes to theological views, and if that's the case, that's going to firmly side me in a certain area as opposed to this area that's being elusive. People who have looked into denominations might know what I'm referring to. But anyway, if you had, I'll let you respond, and then we'll move to the next question.
Anything you do will, because unfortunately you will reach those kind of walls, and sometimes it could just be a massive gray area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like you just gotta kind of compare, contrast, and try to do your research and figure it out.
But
Yeah.
if it didn't matter,
And I think there is problems with relativizing theology. I'm not going to get into specific stuff, at least for this episode, but there are problems with that. With, like, moral relativism,
yeah,
it's kind of the same concept when it comes to certain theological views, because you're like, okay, well, Calvinism is obviously wrong, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't completely relativize theology. I have to have some grounds for saying that this is right and this is wrong.
yeah.
It
But-
could help you kind of grasp the initial aspect, but then you need to dive deeper.
And even if it's uncomfortable for me, admitting that something I don't really, is a little uncomfortable to believe in, and that is going to be different for me, then I have to be willing to admit that, like, yeah, this is not particularly advantageous in many ways, but if this is true, then I need to follow the evidence where it leads and
Yeah, I'm gonna
take my own advice.
I'm gonna tie this back to something every Christian has asked themselves. If it matters, yes or no. Let's say no. The why? So if the different sectors of Christianity, if say it doesn't matter which one you pick for the 100% your truth,
Mm-hmm.
then why are you asking yourself that? It
Exactly.
matters.
Yeah.
Just like me asking myself, hey, is there a God? If it doesn't matter, why am I asking myself this question?
Right.
And so don't ask to the world if it matters, ask to yourself if it matters.
Right. Well, that was a nice little side tangent. Let's get back to the problem of divine hiddenness, because that's what this episode's about.
I'm in immense pain. Bazinga!
So, the next question is, if everyone were born with knowledge of God's existence, how would that change how we live our lives? And I think David kind of mentioned this earlier. But if we did have absolute knowledge of God's existence, I argue that it would act contrary to our salvation and God's will. Because if we knew God existed, that would likely coerce us into submitting to Him, either out of fear or wanting to get something from God, both of which are self-inclined and therefore selfish. But God doesn't want to coerce you into acting a certain way. He wants you to believe in Him of your own accord. There are also a number of divine revelations experienced by characters in the Bible, and some of them rejected God entirely. Look at the Old Testament. God showed His power everywhere. So if divine experience of God wasn't enough for those people, what will be for us? Jesus did everything He could to convince the Jewish authorities that He was the Messiah. Were they convinced? No. Instead, they decided to have Him killed.
Because
If the incarnate Son of God wasn't enough evidence for people, what will be? I'll let you go ahead now.
thinking of that, and this may tie into political beliefs, but if you are born and raised like Jesus is real, God is real, like a lot of people want us to be born and raised, are you ever going to seek Him yourself? Are you ever going to understand why you?
At some point. Because
Not necessarily. We know a lot of people who have not asked that question, who are no longer here on this earth.
yeah.
If you aren't allowed to look for yourself and find God through your own means and find Jesus in terms through your own means, are you just a sheep following the herd?
Yeah, well, I would push back, and I'm probably going to disagree with you on that, because if you really believe that Christianity is true, for example, and you have kids, you're not going to raise them to be agnostic because you might risk them not becoming Christian. You're going to want to raise them Christian. But I think there's part of a burden on the parent to some degree to be able to answer questions when they come up, when your child ages, because if you don't have answers to those questions, they're going to seek elsewhere. And sometimes they might seek answers that help them towards Christianity.
And sometimes they might join a cult.
And sometimes they might seek answers that lead them away from Christianity. So to some degree, it is the burden of the parent to be able to raise their child effectively.
Yeah.
But, I mean, like, if you really believe that, you want to teach them that.
Yeah, but, again, if the child truly believes, it doesn't necessarily mean they need a Christian parent to show them the way. If we are all born, pretend we're in a utopia, a Christian utopia. Everyone's born Christian. We all follow the same set of rules.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those people would you say would truly believe? Think of where we're at now in the South.
Okay.
How many people are born into Christianity? How many people out of those truly understand Christianity?
I wouldn't put a number on it, but there would be a significant portion of society that is born into Christianity, and then probably a significant lesser portion that are thought out about it. I don't know exactly what number I would put that at, because I don't think I've had enough conversations to say, like, okay, according to my survey size, it's like 40%.
It wouldn't be 100%.
But no, it wouldn't be 100%.
Probably
yes, it's
half or less.
Burden, it's a burden of the parent, but at the end, it's individual responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, and this we've probably talked about this a million times, but at some level, you have to make it your own.
Just like the problem of evil, if everyone was Christian, what's the point? There's no opposite. There's no reaction. If everyone believes the same thing, then everyone believes nothing, because there's no opposite. To have Christianity, you must have opposites. To have a Jesus, you must have the devil. To tie into our last episode. And a lot of modern, especially Southern religion, it's more ingrained in you culturally than it is theologically.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas someone like yourself, I would consider you in our area decently versed. You're willing to have these thoughts and you're willing to ask questions. I separate you from the pack because of that. Just like I separate David from the pack of atheists because he's willing to think outside of the box of standard atheism.
I think somebody said one time that that's the mark of a great mind, is being able to entertain ideas that aren't your own.
Yeah. And so, just like God's not going to put a neon sign, everyone's not going to be Christian. Everyone's not going to be Islamic. Everyone's not going to be Jewish. It's personal responsibility to find your truth, to live it, to practice it, and to try to bring people to an understanding versus drag people to a following.
Yeah, because you can't force people to believe something. That's
you
not
can
how it
lead a
works.
horse to water, don't mean it's going to drink.
No, I mean, you can slowly convince people over time, but being like, if you don't believe in this, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true, but
it's never
but that's
changed
not
my
the way
mind.
to speak to people.
Yeah, it just makes like, well, you're kind of an asshole about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, whereas
When
when
you're a dick about it, I don't want to join your religion.
when we talk, we have an understanding of where each other stands. You know my fears, I know your fears. You know my triumphs, I know your triumphs. And we both understand where we stand theologically and ideologically. You don't come at me as punching in my teeth like, Jesus is the one.
Maybe I should start doing that. Maybe it'll. No, I'm
And
just kidding.
I don't come down your throat. I don't know, motherfucker. Listen to me, bitch. Question everything.
You're probably clipping.
Oh, definitely.
That hurt my hand a little
the
bit.
dog woke up.
Yeah, you woke up every creature in this house.
Not every Bell and Scrabby's still asleep. I'm surprised David ain't asleep.
All right.
He's a creature.
Yeah.
And also, on that topic, kind of, the problem with having, like, as we kind of say, like, gotta have a neon sign. When people get too dependent on him,
Yeah, imagine if you
because that's another thing. It will either be like, why aren't you doing anything for me? Or can I please just come on?
That's coercion. See, if there was a giant physical deity in the middle of Egypt that's name is God, that would coerce you to believe in him.
Or just like
or at the very least it would make you believe that he exists, but not necessarily worship
and like
in him. Or you might try and get something out of him.
Like everyone knowing he exists, it's like, come on, G-Man, can you do something for me?
Yeah, so that's why I'm getting at this objection doesn't really get to the heart of belief.
Yeah.
Because it's belief in, not belief that.
Yeah, so obviously true Christians don't need a neon sign to be like, God exists.
I mean, maybe at the end of the day, it's like if he just puts up a storefront, like, just want to let y'all know before, like, it all goes down from here.
There are some billboards out there that say God exists, so maybe that's your sign. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry.
I don't know. Those cost a lot of money. They could like go to a
Homeless shelter.
Yeah.
One last thing about this last question is, like the problem of evil, the problem of divine hiddenness is a modern one. It was obvious to previous cultures that God existed in some form, especially to the Jews of the Old Testament. But did that make them follow God? In some cases, yes. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, it didn't make a difference whether people had evidence of God existing, because in the end, people will do and believe what they want to do and believe.
Yeah.
Cool, next question. Isn't it unloving for God not to prove he exists to someone, and then they go to hell for not knowing about him? Pretty certain we literally just talked about this earlier.
If they don't know, he's going to judge them fairly based on what they lived and how they acted.
Yeah, so I think the framing of this question is kind of... and obviously I made these questions myself, but... they're hypothetical.
You are just an earthly being.
They're hypothetical questions that I can imagine someone actually asking.
Yeah.
Just trying to make the ultimate atheist caricature. I don't know. But, somebody had this question. So I think the phrasing of it is kind of wrong-headed, and it shows a few misunderstandings about God.
Yeah.
And it also gets wrapped up in other objections, such as the problem of evil, see the last episode, and the doctrine of hell, which we'll address in the next episode. It's also essentially psychoanalyzing God, a being which is omniscient, which is an absurdity to claim that one knows better than the source of knowledge and morality itself. And remember how that went for Job, as we discussed last time. So, without giving too much away about the next episode, to answer this question, I'll give a quote from C.S. Lewis for now. Quote, "Honest rejection of Christ, however mistaken, will be forgiven and healed. But to evade the Son of Man, to look the other way, to pretend you haven't noticed, this is a different matter." End quote. So that's how I would...
Yeah,
basically,
I might
short answer.
I might bastardize this, but essentially,
if you know and you turn your back, you burn. If you don't know and you still need the person, you're probably okay.
if you in your earthly body do not comprehend or know of Jesus Christ, the Savior of man, God, the omniscient being, that cannot be put against you in the court.
Mm-hmm.
Because you only had the resources available to you. Whereas if you at one time believe and you turn your back,
that's a different scenario.
yeah.
But also to some degree, you
or
have...
let's say a baby is born,
right,
lives a year and dies. That baby is not at the age of reckoning.
Limited cognitive functioning at that point to
Or
understand what they believe.
Or disabled, or so many different things.
Yeah.
And see, I can appreciate that as an agnostic because, as I've said, probably this episode and probably the last episode, I would rather die an honest man and be sent to hell than live a liar and be sent to hell.
Like the fourth time you said it these past
Yeah.
2 episodes.
Yeah.
It's okay.
But that also stands for someone who, let's say, lives in a remote country that no one ever goes to, no missions ever go to.
Mm-hmm.
They're born in a pre-modern society. They live, they die. That takes away the question of, do they go to hell? Because they never had a chance. Just like and that's the same thing for the baby scenario that I brought up.
There's different, I guess, theodicies about that. Like maybe, God would judge you based on what you would do, or maybe he will kind of nudge you in an intermediate state.
He kind of knows everything, so it'll be able to judge accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, there's the argument that from natural theology that, even if you never have people present evidence to you about God, you might look around you and wonder, how did this world come into existence? How did life come about? How did you might reason from morality? You might come to these conclusions on your own without someone presenting the argument formally to you.
That's why I lie an agnostic over atheist. If that makes any sense.
Trying to please any god you can get your hands on there.
Nah, just being honest with myself. There's something greater than myself that I don't necessarily know. I'm trying to. As an agnostic, the end goal is not necessarily an agnostic. It's a fucked up viewpoint of the word.
Basically, don't be a dick as long as possible until you figure it out.
It's a point in the road, but not the end of the road.
Yeah. And for some people, it's in the road. I might die tomorrow. But I'll die knowing I try to do my best to research and figure out myself.
Yeah, I hope you don't. We gotta suck more episodes out of you before you do that.
Yeah, like at least
like 30 more, maybe.
Probably
Who knows?
more. Probably more.
Who knows? We'll see.
Gonna suck me dry, guys. I wish
No, I'm not gonna do that. Sorry. I'm gonna go ahead and end this conversation before it goes anywhere. All right.
this is why I love this shit.
Yay! We get off on topics.
I mean, I get off
Anyway.
sometimes.
Phrasing.
If Holy Bailey would do it.
Yo.
though. Talking about this reminds me of in Futurama, the episode Godfellas. Basically, if as a view yourself as a god, if you show and do too much, people rely on you. You do too little, people lose faith in you. You gotta have a light touch.
Yeah. All right. So the last question is that's kind of alluded to by the problem of divine hiddenness, and that is belief in God warranted? So, I believe that deep down it is instinctive to believe in God. Though unfortunate as it is, we want nothing to do with God until we're dying and have the sudden realization that maybe this life wasn't all that we made it out to be. I have seen and heard of countless occasions when someone dies, they begin speaking in an existential language. Many all of a sudden believe in a life after death. Funerals always bring a positive message that maybe one day we'll see them again, and leave their attendees wondering, what happens when you die? Atheism leaves you high and dry in this area. It attempts to explain away all of these things by saying it just boils down to chemical reactions in the brain. Your existence is essentially pointless, and all this talk of the afterlife is just left over from religion that will eventually one day die out. But is that an acceptable answer to you? How is that not just a short response to such an interesting series of questions? It seems to me to be extremely reductionistic as an explanation to questions that demand much deeper thought and more existentially satisfying answers. to continue that beautiful, lovely rant. Additionally, theism accounts for more than atheism does. For example, the absolute origins of the universe, see our 2 episodes on that topic. The rational grounding for morality, see morality, objective or subjective. The explanation for supernatural experiences, see implications of the paranormal, among other things. Therefore, I think there is more evidence to believe that God does exist than to believe that God does not exist. And I'll let you guys give your thoughts on that.
Yeah, kind of like early on. Ooh. And I just lost my train of thought. But, well, with like the kind of origins of the universe and everything, as kind of, as I say, like a belief in some form of religious system gives those answers where, say, atheism is a lot of it's just
shot in the dark. We'll figure it out.
Well,
maybe.
Yeah, we're trying to figure it out. We don't know when we'll have it fully figured out. We may never, but that's the scientific method and everything, and complicated math and work. Things we created to try to explain our surroundings.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and as we, like, stated with belief in and, like, having faith, it's pretty subjective. Belief, I forget how exactly you said it, but where, say, like, belief in, like, Jesus existing.
Belief in or belief that.
Yeah.
That's basically what you're getting at, yeah.
Yeah. Where I say, for probably most people, it's warranted. For myself, I still don't believe, but I see why it can be more so warranted than not, because it gives an answer to just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess to play devil's advocate, it could be seen as the easier solution to all those questions when, like, in my mind, it's something we just don't quite know. But as we, like, talked about, it's not a one-stop shop either.
Yeah,
because there's the physical realm, and then, as we said, like with Genesis, the 7 days could be like millennia.
Yeah,
and then it's like how exactly did it start and all that mess.
As I was
but most people kind of use it more so as a quick one-stop shop, like, yeah, exactly, as and like younger creationists and stuff.
Yeah. Basically, as I've kind of mentioned in the section of episodes where we had arguments for God's existence, they're more deductive cases that are logical arguments, philosophical arguments that, like, we can deduce based on what we might know hypothetically about this God, that this explains this sufficiently.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've discussed that.
The nuances are more
what I'm getting
fine
at,
detail, but the kind of overall point.
Yeah, what I'm getting at is basically we're not, and I want to press this point because, there are probably going to be some internet trolls.
Probably.
I'm not trying to imply God of the gaps. I'm not trying to say, this is something we don't know, so we just insert God, therefore we have an answer.
Unlike most people.
I mean, like, a lot of people are going to say, well, that's all these arguments for God's existence is God of the gaps. But that's not what they are, because they deduce characteristic traits about God and explain phenomenon in our universe. And then when you take them as a whole,
it explains who God is and what he did.
Yeah, it starts to look... You have the building blocks of what God is. Also,
where most people do the God of the gaps
type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, which I absolutely hate.
Yeah.
It's like
if we don't know something,
just admit
God did it.
I don't know shit, and I'm just like, I don't know.
It's like,
welcome to Agnostic 101. I don't know.
Like, as I was saying with, like, Genesis, we don't know exactly, technically, how many days it was, because 7 days of God ain't shit.
7 days is an earthly representation.
It's a poem.
Yeah.
exactly.
So it's also very. We talked about that. Just
Yeah.
go listen to the episode.
Please
Good episode.
listen to them all.
Yeah, listen to all of them if you
If
haven't.
you do, I love you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And send me one quote from each episode.
Yeah.
And
That's
if
how we
you-
know you're a real one.
If you do,
Or just send
Join
a,
our fan
I'll
club.
give you a big old smooch on the cheek.
Yeah.
or just in the comments if you're on YouTube, just type "I don't know" in every comments and have it quoting Michael.
Yeah.
Because
Shout out, Michael.
Because I swear every episode.
Yep.
Or
There's
or
always
just
something
say Michael,
quotable from Michael
aka
every episode.
Dr. Pepper of religion.
Yeah.
AK King Ignorance.
Yep. All right,
No.
so back to the thing, the topic. It's not like there's zero evidence that God exists. There's lots of good evidence out there, but you have to seek it out. This starts the relationship out with God properly, because coming to God on His terms instead of our own is exactly what He wants. In reality, the problem of divine hiddenness actually bolsters the claims about Christianity, because it shows that the God of the Bible is consistent with the way that the world really is.
To add in kind of a realistic worldview of that, imagine you're a kid and your parents tell you the man in Chuck E. Cheese is just a normal man. You know, the costume?
Yeah.
Or Santa's not real. We'll go with Santa's not real.
Oh boy.
Ooh, a hot topic. Sorry,
You
little
can
kids.
go tell all your little
I hope your
friends.
children aren't listening to our show.
You can go tell
But
all
if
your,
they are, you know.
all your
Santa's
little
not
friends
real.
that.
Easter Bunny not real.
But until you come up with some evidence,
Uh-huh.
or you go seek it for yourself, you don't know. You're just listening to your parents.
So you're pulling the mask off to Chuck E. Cheese, man.
Yeah.
And that's how you get kicked out of Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah.
For life.
Until you come with some evidence, or you come after seeking for yourself, do you really know, or are you just listening?
Yeah. I think there comes a point in every man's life when he has to decide for himself, does God really exist?
Is Santa Claus real?
Is Santa Claus real?
Is the
Do
Easter
I
Bunny
really
real?
exist?
The Tooth
Do
Fairy.
I exist? Oh, dude.
I mean,
people that get on that. oof.
It's the government
answer is-
God help 'em.
lizard people. It's the water turning frogs gay.
That's the real
I mean,
question.
BPH does.
There's actually something,
And actually, it doesn't turn them gay, it turns them female.
but away from that,
yeah.
that I think that's a real world viewpoint, or like a kid saying, "Hey, Santa Claus is real because my parents told me," versus some kid be like, "No, I saw my parents put presents, and I saw your parents put out presents."
Oof.
So therefore, that kid is like, "Hey, listen, just because this doesn't mean if A times B equals C. Let me show you why that's not true.
All right.
If that makes any sense."
Sure, I get what you're getting at. All right, so we're close to wrapping up here. I understand that most of what I've dealt with in this episode is the philosophical problem of divine hiddenness. But what if it's an emotional issue? What if you're just crying out to God and it doesn't seem like He's listening to you?
Have you read the Bible?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, come on now. Speaking of last episode, did you not see what he did to Job?
yeah. Well, I don't want to. If that's your problem, don't listen to what the rest of I said. The rest is just previously in this episode was mainly for the philosophical issue. But if you're having an emotional issue where, you know, you're crying out to God and He's not listening, it sounds like, I can sympathize with that because I've been there and so have many other people.
First, try to seek a therapist. Second, if it's something serious, seek out a professional.
Third, reach
Third-
out the Face in the Gates podcast.
Well,
Sure.
third,
Actually, that should be your number one.
third
Hey.
with any emotional response, wait a little bit.
Think
Give us some
about it.
time.
Write it down. Come back to it.
Well,
Stop it.
Stop it. Get some help.
I mean, that
I
is
swear we're going to reference that every episode.
that is probably like for an emotional response. My best thing I could recommend is just give it some time. Emotions wax and wane,
True.
but you can take what you were feeling and kind of analyze it and figure out like, oh, okay, and come to a more logical, sound conclusion. You know,
the atheist making some sense.
well, I mean that's basic, like I mean, look at like.
It's just reasoning 101, Michael. Just give.
Well, I mean, the be grim. Look at domestic violence cases with people. Those turn hairy real quick because heavy emotions are involved.
Yeah.
Whereas, say, if it's like two people have an argument and walk away, you can come back and be buddy next day.
Yeah. Well, to the person that is having those doubts and kind of struggling, my advice would be, first of all, you need to be introspective. Be honest about why you're seeking him out. Are you trying to prove someone wrong? Do you want something from him? What are your motives for seeking him? God wants you to seek him out honestly on his terms, and until you put your biases aside and acknowledge that this is about him and not you, you will not find God.
Are you being selfish?
Yeah. Essentially, that's what I'm getting at. I know that's kind of
a roundabout way to get to it. But
harsh words, to be like, hey, you're actually just doing this for selfish reasons, but you might be. And you may not think of that.
Do what I say, and while you're doing what I say, do what he's saying too.
God, the Christian and the atheist melding together to form one union.
It's like that arm, the arm meme.
Yeah.
Because
Christians
basically we're
and
saying
atheists.
take some time and think it out first.
Think that shit out.
Bro.
Christians on one side, atheists on the other side. Talk that shit. Think it out. Be introspective.
See professional.
Get some help. I'm sorry. All right.
Because
Go ahead.
I mean, because as I said, emotions cloud our judgment.
Yeah.
And being able to kind of, as one of our teachers said, simmer down.
Simmer down there, children.
Helps. Because I know I've been in like some heavy emotional situations, and I just took a walk.
Yeah.
Oh, where I just flip off. And I go, is that the best way to handle this?
Probably not. Maybe.
Sometimes it's yes.
Depends.
Sometimes it's you fucked up.
All right. So to wrap up the question, is belief in God warranted? Though we may not have absolute proof that God exists, at least in an objective sense, I think I've successfully put together a case over the previous episodes that shows that belief in God and in Christianity isn't necessarily a leap of blind faith. We have good evidence to believe these things. So why doesn't God just force us to believe that he exists? Well,
Free will.
Simply because that's not who God is. He respects our freedom, and being that we have free will, we have the ability to choose or reject him. The evidence we do have is non-coercive, but it justifies belief. And that's all I have, boys.
Kind of like as we were talking, like having faith can be subjective, but after that you can form objective opinions.
Or the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, both work. If it helps you find...
It does get tied, because a lot of people don't really think about this in terms of like making a distinction between emotional problems and philosophical problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes there's like logical, rational issues, and then sometimes there's our emotional entanglements in things, and that can get tied up, and we can't make the distinction between them sometimes.
A lot of Southern denominations are heavily emotional.
Yeah, but like, think of an
so
issue.
we're kind of, like around here, we're trained to be like based on our emotions and how we react with that versus thinking about the deeper questions.
And so, to some degree, belief involves both.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to kind of...
You can't be cold and emotionless like, I believe in God.
You can't... Well,
you got to sort it out,
You can't weigh heavy on either side.
But also, think of it on a bigger level. Like, let's say me and Bailey get in a heated fucking argument.
Yeah. I'm too tired to do that now, but let's imagine, hypothetically.
A couple days, we might realize we were arguing over stupid shit, and we were letting our emotions over our intellect get the best of us.
Yeah.
Whereas we're both, I'd say Bailey's pretty intelligent.
I guess so.
And I'd like to think of myself as at least average intelligence.
Passes the test of intelligence.
And so...
He can
they're
drive.
good enough.
Did well enough.
And so... We might be heated as fuck in that moment. We might be ready to fight.
Yeah.
But stepping away outside of that scenario, we might look back and be like, we were arguing over fucking 1 + 1. Some stupid shit that doesn't matter.
Or
It's
foreskin.
obviously 3.
I'll still hold my damn position on the foreskin.
All right. See, it's happening. He's getting angry. See, emotions.
See,
they're real.
I'm in too much pain
Bad for you.
to get angry. But you gotta sometimes you gotta take yourself out of the equation.
Yeah.
And sometimes you gotta put yourself in the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say that.
Yeah. I guess the easiest way is like the emotions can be like that spark, but afterwards, let the fire simmer down a little bit and just keep on the little bit of kindling, a little bit of dot, a little bit of introspection.
Yeah. So, as we conclude this episode,
I think this is like one of the only episodes where two of us didn't bully the other.
yeah, we
Yeah,
basically
you
don't hate
filthy
each other.
fucking atheist.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mister. I don't know.
Oh boy, stereotypes.
Yeah.
We are walking stereotypes. Anyway.
I mean, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. So I guess in conclusion, I think we probably all agree, as we did in the beginning, is the problem of divine hiddenness a problem for you?
No.
It's not a problem for you.
I'm an agnostic. I know God's there.
It's not a.
So,
it's
like-
not a thing preventing you from believing in God.
It's obvious. It's obviously not a problem for me because, like, if God came out with a big fucking sign, like, "Hey, Michael, I'm God. This is the nomination. Follow it." I'm gone.
Is that a problem for David? I thought this was actually more your problem because you're like, well, I just don't believe in God. I don't have,
Yeah. Well,
So
I mean,
I didn't know
the
if that was
fundamental
your issue or
idea
not.
is like, I don't believe he exists, but putting myself in, say, someone who would possibly be religious, the idea of him being kind of supernatural in a sense where I can't see him. I don't know he's necessarily right there at the moment. It wouldn't really affect me and hasn't affected my decision and my kind of path.
So it's not the determining factor in whether you believe or disbelieve, basically.
Yeah.
So, like, Ghost.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to bring it to that point, but
Yeah.
Okay.
just because you don't necessarily experience the supernatural doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
And for some people,
Well, David thinks that because he doesn't experience it, it's not real. So that he applies that to God. If he doesn't experience God, it's not real.
Well,
We had to fight at some point.
yeah.
I gotta piss. So thanks, guys, for listening to this episode. If you had anything to say, I'm not gonna cut you off.
Well, I mean, pretty much that kind of, as you said, that initial belief just isn't there.
Yeah.
But putting myself in, say, your shoes, or in my mind, putting myself in kind of different positions, why would God really have to show himself?
Yeah.
but
He-
Brooklyn,
and as we said with like Christianity, he's more of like nudging you or like giving you like maybe small hints that, hey, you might not want to keep up what you're doing.
but quick question
a
for
light
David before
touch.
we end this podcast.
Okay.
David,
Yeah.
would you be willing to experience the supernatural?
I said, sure.
If it comes to you and you experience it, would you accept it?
As accepting as any other experience.
I think. Hold on. With that question, because I think I've asked him this before. I don't know if it was on the mic or not.
I know.
But if you have that supernatural experience,
it would.
would you say it's supernatural, or would you rationalize it and say it was something natural that you don't understand yet?
see the?
Or is it just too much
Oh, I was going to ask a whole
unknown?
different question.
Yeah, I think we've had this on the mic.
Oh, okay.
But
I
if
forget.
you were,
I
I mean,
forget
if
what we talk
it's-
about sometimes.
For like supernatural, it would have to be something beyond, say, like my comprehension. And then that would have to totally change my whole kind of thought process and beliefs and everything. So, but I mean, that's what any unknown experience I've came across. I just gotta be accepting of anything that happens
with the earth,
and change and evolve as situations occur.
what's your human earthly view?
Yes.
If you were to experience God in a way, would you be willing to accept? Just honest answer.
I mean, I hope I would.
No, there's no hope. It's a yes or no. This is a yes or no question. Would you be willing to at least think about it and go home and reflect upon it and figure out, yes, God's real, no, God's not real?
Yeah, I mean,
Because that's all
I feel
I
like
can
if you
ask
have
you.
a supernatural question or supernatural experience, you would have to at least
oh,
question it.
definitely. To say the least. That
Yeah.
would be like the top tier on the list.
But
I
as
mean,
to which direction you would be more biased to lean towards, you probably wouldn't be able to answer depending,
Yeah.
because it probably depends on the experience. I
the
imagine.
experience, and then trying to do some, probably would do some research into like those type of experiences, and then it would go into a deep rabbit hole, and then existentialism would take
Yeah,
hold.
whereas I think if
And
God
then you would
had
reflect on your Facing the Gates episodes.
if God had a neon sign for this fucker,
Well, we'd have a nice, lovely. If it was like say years from now, we would have to all come back and I
do
could
an
be like,
update episode.
I was wrong,
You
boys.
spent 3 years to
Yeah.
record the
And
last
I think
episode.
this was
We'll
sad
hook it
for
up to bias and have it like old time radio.
Hey David, this was sad for me too. If God had a neon sign, I don't necessarily think I'd believe in the motherfucker.
Yeah, and like as I said,
That's just me being honest with myself. Because it'd be like, this seems like a scam.
You would probably question your senses.
and also it could
I would question, as I already do, everything.
it could also be like the what happened if Jesus was a homeless man situation
Yeah.
in a way.
Actually, there's a passage that Jesus, one of his phrases was, "If you give to the less of those, you give to me."
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
it's-
which that song I showed you draws from.
yeah.
yeah, and I mean,
But before we get too far off topic and we carry on this conversation longer than
well,
usual,
that
Yeah.
anything you want to add, Bailey?
yeah, I was actually going to end on that.
Regarding the would David believe in any hypothetical scenario and what exactly atheism is, we're gonna have an episode on that later. It's gonna be a little bit, but that'll be pretty neat. Follow our social medias, dude. Please tell your friends. Send the show to people. Be like, yo, this episode was great. You gotta listen to it.
Or hey,
get
it's
existential.
garbage.
Also,
No.
Who knows?
It is great. You're not allowed to think it's bad
Oh,
because you are determined to like it because we're robots, and I'm telling you, I'm mind control. Okay, I'm done. Anyway, whatever.
Also, I'm
sorry.
hoping the person we all have talked to continues with this podcast, continues listening. The person my girlfriend showed this podcast to, I hope you're continuing listening. I hope you're a continuing viewer.
Yeah.
And for anyone else, reach out to us. Talk to
Hit
us.
us up. Facing the Gates
What's your-
pod at gmail.com. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
what's our Instagram?
Facing the Gates.
What's our
Yeah.
Twitter?
Facing the Gates.
Do we have a Facebook, right?
Yeah, we have Facebook.
What's our Facebook?
Facing the Gates? It's the same on all
We
social
should
media.
make a
So, hit us
SoundCloud and
up.
like do a mixtape.
Yeah, hit
It's
us
also
up.
in the description. So, yeah.
Ask
As
us
in
your
every episode.
theological questions, your
Yeah.
ideological questions, your earthly questions.
Send us questions. If we get enough of them, we'll do a Q&A. If not, we'll just answer them to your face.
Tell us your viewpoint.
And by to your face, we mean on the internet.
Yeah,
but
tell us your viewpoint.
Or Bailey
Tell
might
us
give
your
you a phone
religion.
call and you talk for like 2 hours.
yeah.
Tell us your religious ideas. And if they're... You might even get a Zoom call from us. You never know.
You never know.
Never know. We
You
might get thirsty for some content once we get done with the Judeo-Christian Bible.
Yeah, well, I've got to pee, so I think we're done with this episode.
We'll talk to you guys next time. Love y'all.
Love you, bye.
Mwah.